Dear netizens, this video is from yesterday's No King event. The No King protest activity. Looking at the most severe divisions in American history, I can tell you, the division in American public opinion, definitely since the Vietnam War. It's the most serious I've ever witnessed, and now there's no middle ground left. Each side thinks the other is evil. This is exactly it. Of course, the MAGA camp thinks. Even the Communist Party isn't as bad. The Chinese Communist Party isn't as bad. Russia isn't as bad either. The worst are the leftists. A certain internet celebrity, our Cantonese-speaking influencer, Trump must stabilize the country before dealing with foreign aggression. So how do you stabilize things at home? Chiang Kai-shek opposed the communists to stabilize. It's not to wipe out all the leftists. The problem is that leftists make up over 40% of the US population. And it's been above 40% for a long time. Especially among intellectuals, it's 60% or even 70%. Of course, the leftists think. The MAGA camp are fascists. The funniest thing is, this is the fascist Nazi. Racial discrimination. I met an American friend, a really kind person, on a cruise ship. And I chatted with him. We were just making small talk. And eventually we started talking about buying stocks. He finally asked me. He just couldn't help but ask me, "So, are you a Trump supporter?" I told him I don't support Trump. Then he felt ready to tell the truth. "I really can't stand Trump," he said. "What I'm saying is, to be honest, I actually don't understand Americans." And you don't understand America either. There are over 40% of Americans who are like this. The America they see is not the same America you see. Let me tell you, I understand where you're coming from. It's not that I don't get it, but there are things I don't agree with. You get what I mean? I know how you all think, but I can still disagree, right? Last Saturday, the U.S. federal government held a military parade in Washington, D.C. That cracked me up. The American soldiers were just walking. Look at how impressive the Chinese soldiers are. Every single movement is perfectly synchronized. Like when they kick their legs and all that. It's accurate to within less than a centimeter. The American soldiers looked like they were out for a stroll. American soldiers never been trained for military parades, and people still compare them to Russian military parades. Compare China's military parade. It's just hilarious. I think even Trump knows it. This group just looked like a bunch of stragglers. It didn't feel like a real military parade at all. Other countries train for parades over the long term. Let me tell you, even Taiwanese soldiers have to train to march in step. I've asked American soldiers about it, and they never trained for it. At the 250th anniversary parade in Washington, D.C., 2,000 protests across the U.S., with millions of people taking part. Wherever there were protests, it was impressive, but Minnesota had none. This was the third in a series of demonstrations. In April, it was called Hands Off. In May, it was May Day. And in June, No King's Day. It wasn't just unhappy about a single policy. This is the policy direction for the second term. It was a total denial and protest. This represented a strong and organized grassroots movement against authoritarianism. The funniest thing is when people call these protesters animals. Please, collect the money. As soon as people say the protesters were paid, the protesters are upset. Because back in 2014 and 2019, we were all falsely accused, said to collect money. If you say 1 million people were paid, I want to ask, how did you pay them? Did you write them checks? If so, you could have arrested them right away. 1 million checks being transferred, wire transfer, is that right? Or handing out cash, oh, like that. Giving out thousands of dollars to each person. We need to find more than 100 container terminals. And then these 1 million people would line up to get their money. Lining up from San K1 all the way to Saiwan. Giving money works, you tell me. Then you could have caught them, right? These ridiculous accusations keep getting repeated on the X platform. That's it. All right. These 3 protests in the U.S. This one is hands off. April 5th. Across the U.S., hundreds of thousands of people. May Day, May 1st. This one was much smaller. This time, in 50 states, 2,000 events, an estimated 1 million participants. This is hands off. Massive budget cuts. Removal of policies announced and led by Elon Musk. May Day. Weakening public education, healthcare and workers' protections, taught by unions. Birthday parades, personality cults, immigration raids, deportation actions, the main demands. Opposing budget and staffing cuts. Opposing the weakening of the social safety net. Rejecting authoritarian leadership. Opposing militarized ceremonies, politically defending democratic institutions. Hands off. Some cuts don't heal. If you cut, it actually means cutting the budget. These scripts are really well written. Some cuts, once you make them, it is not curative. Not my president. Not my president. Don't steal my data. People over profit. People matter more than profit. Healthcare over hedge funds. Healthcare is more important than hedge funds. No kings. That's what democracy looks like. Reject authoritarianism. Most importantly, oppose the glorification of military ceremonies, over-politicization, democracy being suppressed. All right. The evolution of the 3 major protest movements is different. It started with dissatisfaction over socio-economic policies, with everyone disagreeing about policy, and then moved towards systemic breakdown. Are you threatening the American democratic system? I think. They said I'm against Trump. Do you understand? My bottom line is human rights. And human rights need democracy to protect them. But Trump doesn't care about the democratic system or the rule of law. Ultimately, it's about the legitimacy of the entire political system and rejecting the cult of personality. No kings. Hands off is a mid-level warning. May Day is about economic and class mobilization. No kings represents the overall political tension, a confrontation that has already escalated to this level, the level of demands. May Day is about material livelihood. Hands off is about defending the system, and no kings is about values. What exactly does our democracy need? All of these are peaceful assemblies. Northwest Kings avoids the parade ground. Held simultaneously around the world, with even greater organization and symbolism. Not parade ground. When you enter the parade area, conflicts will occur. I've always said, others protest. You shouldn't stage a counter-protest right next to them, blocking their procession. That will always end in a fight. Basically, you're trampling on the other side's right to demonstrate. Do you understand? Some of the most serious divisions in the United States since its founding. Clearly, the American Civil War was brewing for a long time, and eventually it broke out. How should I put this? Slavery was one issue, but there were actually others as well. The North backed protectionism. The South supported free trade because the North was starting to industrialize. As for the South, if you implement protectionism, the goods the South sells get more expensive. Right. And there was also a cultural clash. The Southern plantation culture, the South, is now considered politically incorrect. Watch Gone with the Wind. That is, what we translated as The Beauty in Troubled Times. That's not the case. The name of the movie is Gone with the Wind. That is, it's about a civilization. This is Gone with the Wind. In fact, the culture of the South was swept away with the wind. During period of division, these were Southern states, the Confederate States of America. And these were the Northern states. The nature of the split, national division. The North and South opposed each other, not only in politics and economics, but the land was torn apart geographically. Let me tell you, this was very serious. But at that time, the United States already had a population in the tens of millions. Several tens of millions, in fact, soldiers killed, from 618,000 to 698,000. Another 1.5 million were wounded. There are only tens of thousands of civilians. During the same period, in China, specifically, the Taiping Rebellion, the Nian Rebellion, China Civil Wars. Guess how many people died? That's already a lot for the United States. Millions, 600,000 died. That's a huge number. Tens of millions of people. China had hundreds of millions. Guess how many people died in China? China estimated death. 73 million people. Can you honestly believe that? Right now, can you? That's China for you. So when you talk about the Nanjing massacre, yes, 100,000 people died. It was terrible. But compared with the Chinese, it was truly brutal. Chinese people would wipe out cities at the drop of a hat. Let me tell you, Hangzhou had 800,000 people, and a few thousand survived. Taiping Heavenly Kingdom captured Hangzhou. Qing army retook it. They found only a few thousand left alive. That's how it was. Back then, there were no modern protests. No protests marches. It was all about armed mobilization and war. I've studied American history. I want to study American history. And during the Civil War, they always emphasize one thing. Every professor who teaches American history, and if you've studied American history, what was the American Civil War fought for? If you say it was for slavery, they'll surely tell you that's wrong. It was for the unity of the country. Because at that time, they hadn't announced free the slaves, emancipation declared in war. When war began, announced freedom to slaves. But there was already a tendency towards abolishing slavery. Lincoln's election proved it. All right. This time, August 28, 1963. This was something that really shocked me. It was 1963. 1963. The March on Washington. The civil rights movement was at its peak, and Martin Luther King was demanding an end to racial segregation and protection of workers' rights. I can tell you the history of United States, American history. Ever since the Civil War, emancipated, and black people had civil rights, citizenship once meant that. In the southern states, with northern troops stationed there, they could elect representatives, excluding the slave owners. Who knows? Finally, this is it. Eventually, the slave owners kept up guerrilla warfare, fighting for several years, and the Northern Army couldn't stay stationed there long term. In the end, the South rejoined, but they were given some very harsh conditions to rejoin the Union. Afterwards, they couldn't secede again. The Northern troops withdrew, and once the Northern troops pulled out, the white people in the South started using violence against black people, not allowing them to vote. They also created certain laws, not saying black people couldn't vote, but requiring literacy in order to vote, and using all sorts of methods. You have to pay taxes to vote, to exclude black people from voting. So, black people, in principle, had the right to vote, but because voting rights were controlled by the states, the southern states ended excluding black people voting until Martin Luther, that it was forbidden to restrict anyone's right to vote in any way. No longer could they use education level, whether you lived nearby. Do you have a house? Do you pay taxes? All these things were completely abolished. So, actually, it all went through a round of civil war. Actually, you know, after the Civil War ended, there was still a period of guerrilla warfare. Result: the North couldn't handle white population in the South, so the policies of racial discrimination continued, with white society using segregation policies against black people fighting for equality. Tension, confrontation. 250,000 people participated in the most famous I Have a Dream event. As a result, President Johnson passed the Voting Rights Act, abolishing all discriminatory laws and civil rights restrictions. So this is all right. The next was serious. 1969. This is 1969. On November 15th, 1969. Because, let me explain it to you. It was an anti-Vietnam War movement because over 600,000 Americans were sent to fight in Vietnam. And at that time, there was a draft system, which meant every young person had to go to war. Young people didn't want to fight. You know, they drafted college students for war. The most famous example was boxing champion Muhammad Ali. He would rather go to jail and lose his heavyweight title. No going to war. He went to jail. That's why you see people like John Lennon were so anti-war. As the Vietnam War escalated, anti-war sentiment rose. Students and veterans were widely involved. Everyone should watch. That is, that Tom Hanks movie. There's a scene where he suddenly goes on stage to give a speech. Tom Hanks lays flowers for the U.S. military police. 1967, War of Secession. With the Hawks supporting the war and the Doves opposing it, society split. At first, Americans supported the war. But when those bodies started coming home, mothers were devastated, weeping, and then they started drafting citizens to fight, which led to serious divisions in America. In October, there was a wave of protests with 100,000 people. November, 500,000 gathered at Congress. Millions participated overall. This is, in my memory, the most intense period of division in America. Black Lives Matter 2020. George Floyd. There was violence all across the country. The way the police enforced the law, was it excessive? Discrimination against black people. Between 15 and 26 million people took part, making it one of the largest protests in American history. As a result, there were some local police reforms. This is exactly it. Things can't be this violent. That is to say, I'm against guns. I really think guns need to be restricted because once you have guns, it just turns into this level of violence. Those police officers, if not for everyone being allowed to carry guns. In the States, when a cop points at you, they'll tell you to put your hands up now. Show hands. They have the right to shoot you. Did you know that? Both hands. Put both hands on the wall, as they fear you have a gun to shoot them. Protests during the Donald Trump era. From 2016 to now, 2021. The Capitol riot on January 6th, the MAGA faction believes that you are taking America's money to fund foreign countries and sending troops overseas, which are the three main crimes, allowing both illegal and legal immigrants to steal their jobs. Globalization has left American workers without jobs. Banned. The fourth. This is the progressive thinking. They're really afraid their son will go to school and come back as a daughter. That's the fourth main reason. The anti-Trump side believes that, in fact, they think Donald Trump's actions are against globalization. Globalization right past decade, and this politically correct, progressive mindset is actually a consensus in academia. They feel that in the past, some things were wrong, like racial discrimination and gender issues, and now we need to correct them. That's basically what it means. Do you get it? And the United States needs to take part in managing the world order. Otherwise, world falls to chaos. A stable world order is beneficial to the U.S. You can crack down on illegal immigrants and refugees. But you also need human rights treatment. Because the U.S. has signed human rights conventions, you really have to always treat people as human beings. Pandemic, immigration policies, intense confrontations in international relations. Most extreme act violence was on January 6th, the storming of the Capitol. On January 6, 2021, 2,000 to 2,500 Trump supporters stormed Capitol, 700 arrested. In June 2025, No King protests, 2,000 protest events, New York City. 75,000 people, and it said there were 100,000 in Philadelphia, with nationwide mobilization reaching into the millions. Social media and mainstream media are at odds, and tensions run high between federal and local police. Protests and counter-protests are common. If this keeps up, America's democratic system will collapse. This is exactly if both sides. So what is democracy? It's everyone following rules and using those rules to decide how major policies should be determined. The side with more people still can't trample on the rights of the minority. The majority makes the decisions, but the rights of the minority are respected. Respecting rights and rule of law, that's really what it's all about. But now, when it comes to this, people can't agree anymore. Everyone sees the other side as the devil, can kill him. There's no way I want to be in the same country as them. They should leave. With things like this, the democratic system simply can't survive. Want to beat the other side, they won't cooperate together. The United States is bound to fall apart. Comparing and reflecting on major protests in American history since its founding. During the Civil War, it was absolutely devastating. Next was the peak of the civil rights and anti-war movements. During the Trump era, it hadn't yet turned into a civil war, but the peaceful transfer of power was obstructed, and Congress was stormed. This was an unprecedented test for the democratic system. People today believe there's no need to listen to the judgment of the courts. Once a president is elected, they have the ultimate authority. This is what we call populism. They don't believe in the separation of powers and think it's okay not to hand over power. The scale of mobilization in the 1969 anti-war movement. In 2022 BLM, millions of members. The current No Kings protests are even smaller than Black Lives Matter. But since Trump took office, the largest confrontational demonstration and countless more conflicts are on the horizon. Protests in the earliest days were focused on single issues, like slavery, discrimination, Vietnam War. Now, issues involve the legitimacy of elections, pandemic policies, immigration, global conflicts. The rifts between camps have become even more pronounced and long-lasting. This division is now much more about values and ideology, and it's become even more entrenched. In the past, protests often led to immediate legislative compromises. For example, the Civil Rights Act, Vietnam talks, Vietnam War, and police reform. But with this current wave of conflict, whether both sides will compromise, let me ask you, that's how it is. There have been 5 major splits. The most serious one was a bloody armed conflict. From 1960 to 2020, the protests took on different forms and backgrounds, but the No King movement represents an even newer national divide. The very foundation of democracy is being questioned. The MAGA camp believes this democracy is fake, that you people are fake Democrats. You're cheating. Public demands are intense. The media landscape is deeply divided, difficult to reconcile. The American system is facing a serious challenge.